Approximately 2 months ago, I approached my mom with the idea of moving into an apartment. She thoroughly checked the safety of the place, and once assured, she gave me the green light. Due to my dad's recovery from surgery, he couldn't assist with the move, but my mom and I managed to handle everything. The landlord handed me the key, suggesting that I meet some of the friendly neighbors in the apartment complex. Excited about having my own place, I quickly settled in. After a speedy shower, I planned to meet a few neighbors I had chatted with during the move. Unexpectedly, a knock on my door disrupted my plans. Opening it, I found a tall man, around 30, looking a bit wet from what seemed like a swim. I could smell the chlorine on him. We exchanged greetings, and I learned he was happy to see a young person like me moving in. We shared a laugh, and our conversation flowed naturally. I invited him inside, and we continued chatting over coffee and tea. As the night progressed, he left, complimenting the pleasant addition of a young resident like me in the apartments. Blushing, I felt a bit shy but overall grateful for the friendly encounter. Later that night, I received a friend request from him on Facebook, which surprised me. Accepting it, I realized I hadn't explicitly shared my Facebook or even my name. A brief moment of unease passed, and I dismissed it, assuming I might have overlooked it during our chat. Getting ready for bed, I changed into my pajamas, short shorts and a crop top, and settled in for the night, trying not to dwell on the Facebook incident. The next morning, while doing laundry, I bumped into him again in the apartment complex's laundry room. It was a bit awkward, but I blushed, noticing he was in good shape. He offered to bring my clothes to my apartment once they were done, which I gladly accepted. Later, I heard a knock on my door, and when I called out, Aaron entered, returning my clothes. He advised against leaving the door unlocked and playfully speculated what he would do if it weren't me. I joked about screaming, and he assured he'd rush to help. That night, however, took a horrifying turn. A noise woke me up, and as I switched on the light, I found my clothes scattered on the floor. To my shock, Aaron stood there, a piece of my underwear against his mouth and nose. He grinned, claiming he knew I wanted him, and advanced towards me. Terrified, I protested, but he pushed me down, leaving me feeling foolish and vulnerable. Suddenly, bright lights filled the room, and a strong voice ordered Aaron to let go and get down on the ground. It was the police. They arrested Aaron, but the ordeal left me scared and broken. The following day, I cried uncontrollably and sought refuge at my parents' house for a while. Reflecting on the incident, I couldn't help but think about how much worse it could have been without the intervention of a kind neighbor who witnessed the break-in and called the police. It's a sobering reminder to be cautious, not to trust strangers too quickly, and prioritize one's safety above all else. A couple of years ago, back when I shared a house with my ex-boyfriend, we settled into a 2-bedroom home, turning it into our own little haven. We transformed one of the bedrooms into an office, mainly because the only bathroom was accessible through it. Since friends crashed on our sofa occasionally, we wanted them to use the bathroom without having to go through our bedroom. About a month into our new place, my ex was out with his coworkers, leaving me alone at home. I spent the early evening enjoying some takeout and watching TV. Every now and then I heard peculiar noises, but each time I tried to investigate, the sounds mysteriously ceased. As the night grew later, I decided to head upstairs, planning to use the computer before bedtime. At that time, we hadn't set up our phone lines, so I relied on a pay-as-you-go phone with no credit, rendering it useless inside the house. Sitting in the dimly lit back room with just a small table lamp, I heard those strange noises again. A faint rattling sound demanded my attention, prompting me to turn off the music and discern its source. After investigating, I couldn't find anything suspicious outside our bedroom window, given the limited visibility in our small yard, surrounded by a tall brick wall. Resuming my activities, I turned the music back on, only to hear a screeching noise later, akin to metal scraping against metal. This time, the sound was faint, as if someone was attempting to be discreet. Growing increasingly frightened, I left our bedroom to retrieve a heavy iron rod found in the back of the closet. In the darkness, I didn't want to turn on any lights, unsure of what was happening and reluctant to reveal my location to potential intruders. Armed with the iron rod, I returned to the office bedroom, closed the door silently, locked it, and placed a chair under the handle. For about 20 minutes, nothing occurred, and I began feeling a bit foolish for getting so worked up. However, I refrained from turning the music back on, and my decision proved crucial. Shortly after, I started hearing hushed whispers, distinctly male voices, suggesting two people were outside. Fortunately, the voices seemed to originate from the slightly open office window. Seeking a better view, I climbed up to the bathroom ledge to peer into the alley behind the house. Unable to see anything, the whispers grew louder, right behind the gate. Despite not catching the entire conversation, I gleaned that these guys had noticed our move and spotted our valuable possessions, including guitars, computers, a DSLR camera, TV, gaming consoles, and more. It dawned on me that they might have observed I was home alone, intending to wait for me to sleep before attempting a break-in. Perched on the bathroom ledge, a seemingly endless time passed until a sudden bright light startled me. Initially, I feared it was a flashlight aimed at the back of the house, but the barking of dogs and distant shouting indicated otherwise. Looking back, I realized the house across the alley had a powerful light, illuminating their yard. Grumbling and swearing ensued, followed by hurried footsteps fading away down the alley. Locked in the bathroom until my ex-boyfriend returned home drunk at 4 a.m. I couldn't shake off the fear and remained sleepless throughout the night. The next morning, when I ventured into the yard, my gate hung precariously, making it easy for anyone to access from the alley. Scratches on the back of the gate's keyhole hinted at an attempt to break the lock. If not for the alertness of the house behind us, I shudder to think what might have unfolded that night. I'm a 24-year-old woman, and I began working as a babysitter to help my parents cover my college expenses. We weren't financially well off, and I aimed to avoid relying on student loans. Initially, I babysat for neighbors, but my reputation for taking good care of kids spread, leading to more requests from parents, especially on weekends and special events. Most of the children I babysat were easy to handle, making me enjoy the job. The experience sparked an interest in changing my college major to something related to working with kids, such as childcare. Babysitting became more than just a source of income. It ignited a strong desire to protect the kids under my care. One Friday night, instead of hanging out with friends, I opted to babysit for one of the families I regularly helped. Driving my old Jetta to their sizable home in a fancy neighborhood, I appreciated their nice house and generous payment. The parents were already at the door, exchanging quick goodbyes before hurrying off to a fancy event. The family had 2 boys, a 5-year-old and a 1-year-old, both already asleep when I arrived. With little to do until the parents returned, I contemplated watching a movie but feared waking the kids. Remembering the lady of the house had a collection of romance novels, I decided to indulge in some reading. Sitting in the dimly lit kids' room with a nightlight providing enough illumination, I moved a sofa closer to the window to glance at the street outside. Engrossed in a captivating book, I suddenly noticed movement outside the window. Assuming it was the parents returning, my relief turned to fear when I spotted 2 guys in dark clothes, one with a mask covering his face. Frozen with fear, I reached for my phone, calling the lady, but she didn't answer. Unable to contact the man in time, the 2 guys approached the house, and I realized they were trying to find a way inside. Fortunately, I had locked all the doors and checked them again before going upstairs. Dialing 911, I explained the situation, and the dispatcher instructed me to gather everyone in the house and find a safe hiding spot. Concerned the police wouldn't arrive quickly enough, I grappled with the decision to escape, but couldn't leave the 2 sleeping kids behind. Panic set in as I wondered where to hide, fearing for my safety. The tension escalated when I heard the sound of breaking glass downstairs. Time was running out. Securing the door with a chair, I rushed to get the baby carrier from the closet, silently placing the baby inside. The older brother woke up, and before he could make a sound, I covered his mouth. Footsteps approached, and the men attempted to force their way in. The older boy joined us on the roof, and we found ourselves stuck, unsure of where to go. As the men broke in, we huddled in the corner of the roof, the baby still sleeping, and the boy holding onto me tightly. Terrified, I silently cried, praying for help. When one of the men discovered us, our eyes met, and for a moment, I feared the worst. However, he turned away and alerted his partner to our supposed escape. With the police closing in, the men fled, jumping over the fence. Sirens approached, and the police found us on the roof. Shaken, they brought us back inside. The kids' parents returned shortly after, and my parents arrived too. The fear lingered, but I felt a strange sense of relief that the men didn't catch us, especially the one who seemed hesitant to harm us. Last summer, I opted to skip taking any classes and landed a job at a gas station close to my college campus. The decision was driven by a bit of disillusionment with school, and I figured I could make some extra cash during my break. Surprisingly, the gas station was the first and last place I applied to, and they hired me on the spot. It seemed a bit odd, but I didn't question it. The catch, however, was that they only wanted me for the night shift, spanning from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. I knew it would mess up my already chaotic sleep schedule, but I decided to give it a shot and see how it went. Surprisingly, most of the time, it wasn't that bad. The initial hours of the shift were busy, but the late night hours were considerably slow, giving me time to clean, restock shelves, and relax until the morning rush. While occasional suspicious characters wandered in, nothing had spiraled out of control until that one Thursday night. My coworker left around midnight, leaving me alone to man the station. Time flew by, and before I knew it, it was almost 2 a.m. That's when a man walked in, and I got an immediate bad vibe. He had a shaved head adorned with tattoos of strange symbols, and I suspected he was a skinhead. Not helping his case, he parked his dirty, lifted pickup truck in the handicap spot. As if that wasn't enough, he spewed slurs at me, thinking I looked Jewish. It was 1:58 a.m., and he spent a few minutes wandering around the store. In the end, he brought only a case of beer to the counter. Unfortunately, it was 2:01 a.m., and our county had a law prohibiting alcohol purchases between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. I explained this to the man, politely and apologetically, but he immediately grew agitated. He ranted about the law, claiming it went against the principles of a free country. Trying to reason with him, I emphasized I was just doing my job. This, however, led to him criticizing me, as if I were some spineless pawn for my boss. Feeling the tension rise, I asked him to leave. Instead of complying, he changed his tone, acting friendly and downplaying the situation. He suggested bending the rules for just a few minutes. Perhaps against my better judgment, I caved, sold him the case of beer, and he left with a satisfied smile. However, the relief was short-lived. Rather than driving away, he opened the tailgate of his truck, sat down, cracked open a beer, and started drinking. My gut feeling told me this wasn't over. A few minutes later, another truck pulled up, and two more guys with shaved heads and tattoos joined the first man. They stood around, smoking and drinking. Knowing I had to intervene, I mustered the courage to tell them loitering and open drinking were illegal. However, they stared at me through the window, smirking as if challenging me. Before I could act, an SUV pulled in, and two more guys joined the group. It was evident they were all part of the same skinhead group. My paranoia kicked in, imagining they were planning something sinister, like burning down the store because the owner's wife was Mexican. The first guy returned, even more intoxicated, and purchased another case of beer. Before I could refuse, he hinted at having friends who wouldn't appreciate me denying him. Feeling threatened, I reluctantly let him have his way. He went back outside, and the skinheads cheered at the fresh case of beer, tossing around the empty cans. Feeling trapped with these individuals, I decided to lock the store door, hoping they wouldn't come back in. I retreated to the office, called the police, and waited anxiously. A cruiser arrived after several minutes and the officer told them to leave. There was some shouting, but thankfully, they left without causing a major scene. The cop waited for them to disperse before leaving himself. Worried about potential repercussions, I cleaned up the mess left behind. The next day, I reluctantly decided to quit that job. The fear of being stuck behind the register if those guys returned was too much. I still worry that one of them might recognize me around town. I don't know what those people are capable of, but my town is unfortunately full of individuals like them, always causing problems. Back in my 20s, I worked as an overnight lead at a local retail store. It wasn't your typical big chain grocery store. It had only about 8 or 9 locations. Most nights, I had an overnight stalker to assist, but occasionally, I found myself alone for the entire shift. Given the store's size, it wasn't a high-pressure working environment. Sometimes, I deliberately slowed down my pace to ensure I wouldn't run out of tasks. On this particular night, I was flying solo, engaged in my routine of stocking shelves. My mind wandered, contemplating random thoughts, when a knock at the front entrance jolted me. Initially, I almost didn't register the sound due to my spaced-out state, but once I did, confusion set in. The knocking echoed through the store, and as I approached the entrance, I spotted a hooded man outside. "We're closed. Won't be open until 8 a.m., I conveyed through the glass, pointing to the closed sign on the door. The man gazed at me, but remained silent. I reiterated that we were closed, yet he continued to stare for a few more seconds before walking away. I observed his departure, but it seemed like he hadn't parked anywhere nearby. It struck me as odd, but I brushed it off, assuming he was simply at the wrong place. By 2 a.m., I had covered half of the aisles and was ready for my lunch break. I left the boxes as they were and headed to the break room at the opposite end of the building. After about half an hour, I returned to work, strolling through the store and reaching the aisle where I had left off. As I glanced up, a man walked past the other end, seemingly oblivious to my presence. A sudden rush of fear enveloped me. Listening intently, I heard the man's footsteps heading toward the side of the building I had just come from. Instinctively, I hid behind the shelves, and soon after, I heard him rushing out of the break room. The footsteps transformed into a sprint, growing louder as they approached. Panicked, I ran for the other end of the aisle, glancing back to see the man turning and running towards me. Reaching the front door, I fumbled with my keys, unlocking it with shaky hands. Just as I stepped out, a bright flash caught my eye, accompanied by a deafening pop, a gunshot. The sound reverberated, and I sprinted around the building, making it to my car. Huddled in the back seat, I dialed 911. Fortunately, the man didn't pursue me outside. He had vanished by the time the police arrived. Upon investigation, the police discovered the back door busted open, accompanied by heavy tools nearby. The most chilling revelation was the gunshot hole near the front doors. The man's motive remained unknown, with law enforcement speculating it might be a result of a mental breakdown or psychotic episode. He seemingly had no logical reason to target me, except for the fact that I was alone. Following that harrowing incident, I no longer worked at the store. However, the years that followed were marked by heightened vigilance every single night, haunted by the memory of that unsettling encounter. On a cold December night, I arrived at the gas station, where I worked the overnight shift from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. Having been at this job for several months, I wasn't particularly fond of it. However, finding alternative employment proved challenging, and considering some aspects of my life, night shifts suited my personal schedule the best. Despite my weariness every night, I struggled through each shift. Pulling into the parking lot, I noticed only one other car beside the building, belonging to my coworker. After relieving him of his shift, it was just me for the rest of the night. The manager had left a task list on the desk, but it didn't seem overly demanding. My estimation was that it would take no more than an hour to complete all the assigned tasks. I procrastinated a bit, delaying the inevitable to prevent myself from falling asleep as fatigue set in. Around midnight, a car pulled into the station. Glancing out the window, I observed an old SUV parked by one of the pumps. Given the snowy weather, most people weren't out and about, making occasional customers a normal occurrence. Returning to my phone and scrolling through videos, I lost track of time until I looked up and saw the SUV still parked outside, its headlights off, doors closed, seemingly waiting for gas. Concerned, I peered outside, checking both sides of the building, but no one was in sight. Given the freezing temperatures, I grew nervous about the individual in the car. I paid closer attention, hoping to spot any movement or see someone return to the vehicle. However, nothing happened. It was as if the car had been abandoned next to the pump. After a moment's contemplation, I decided to put on my jacket and investigate. My suspicions were confirmed. It was too cold for anyone to be in the car with the engine off, and no one was visible outside. I approached the vehicle, looking through the windows, and called out, "Hello, anyone in there? Just checking to see if you're okay." However, from my vantage point, it seemed empty. Though not entirely certain, I was pretty sure no one was inside. Perplexed, I backed away and noticed shoe prints in the snow leading towards the side of the building, not the front. Inspecting the footprints, I realized they appeared to originate from the car. Feeling the chill, I decided to warm up inside before further investigation. Back at the counter, I turned on a small heater and warmed my hands. After only 30 seconds to a minute, a thump echoed through the building from behind me. Startled, I spun around, but there was nothing in sight. Walking around the counter, I noticed puddles of melted snow by the back room's entrance. Feeling a chill run down my spine, I approached the supply room. Turning the corner, I could discern the outline of a tall figure with broad shoulders and a large, scruffy beard, staring right at me from the dark. My heart paused for a moment, and after the initial shock, my instinct was to retreat to the counter. Perhaps shock had paralyzed me. Staring at the doorway for an uncertain period, I quietly picked up the store phone and whispered for police assistance. The next 10 minutes felt like an eternity as I waited in fear. No sounds emanated from the supply room during this time, intensifying my anxiety. When 2 police officers finally arrived, I directed them to the man's location. They searched the room while I stayed by the front, but to my surprise, they emerged without anyone else. The man had vanished. Watery shoe prints surrounded the back door, leading to fresh tracks in the snow that extended into the dark, empty field for miles. Despite subsequent searches, which were challenging due to the vast field and the cold, windy night, no trace of the man was found. The SUV was taken in for further investigation, but curiously, there was no history of ownership. The mystery of who the man was, his purpose, and his current whereabouts remained unsolved, leaving us with more questions than answers. A few weeks ago, a harrowing incident unfolded as I made my way home from my friend's apartment late at night. Our apartments were a mere 5 minutes apart, and our habit of hanging out often meant I was quite familiar with the route. It must have been around 1 a.m., and the roads were eerily quiet, devoid of any other cars. Departing from the tranquility of my friend's apartment road, I transitioned onto a busier road that would take me about a mile to reach my apartment complex. A simple left turn awaited me at the end of this route. As I ventured onto this busier road, its emptiness struck me. No other vehicles in sight. Approaching an intersection, a red light greeted me. To my left, on the little concrete median between my lane and the opposite direction, stood a man. It was peculiar for someone to be there at such an hour, especially considering he wasn't crossing the road. He simply stood in the middle, awaiting something. As I came to a stop at the red light, the man, less than 10 feet away, walked over and positioned himself right outside my driver's window. Curiosity and unease intertwined as he knocked, prompting me to roll down my window slightly. The man, with an air of sketchiness, asked for a ride. Instantly, I declined. Rather than relenting, he moved swiftly to the rear passenger side door, which, unbeknownst to me, was still unlocked. The next moment blurred into a chaotic sequence. He opened the door, entered the back seat, and before I could react, seized me from behind. Panic surged through me as he grabbed my right arm and pulled me backward. In that moment of terror, self-defense took a back seat to my instinct to escape. After a brief struggle, I managed to break free. Throwing open my driver's door, I hastily abandoned the vehicle, jumping out and sprinting away. Without looking back, I raced back to my friend's apartment, my refuge. Meanwhile, the mysterious intruder remained in my car. I didn't observe his subsequent actions, whether he drove away or lingered. Safe within my friend's apartment, I reached for my phone, grateful that it had remained in my pocket. Dialing the police, I recounted the chilling episode to an officer who promptly arrived at my friend's apartment. Details were documented, a police report filed, and my car reported as stolen. Graciously, my friend provided me with a ride home, sparing me the need to venture out the next day. Astonishingly, the following night saw my car discovered abandoned in a Walmart parking lot just 10 minutes away. The relief of recovering my car was tinged with the sight of its slightly disheveled interior. While the incident could have spiraled into something far worse, I remained unharmed. As I reflect on the incident, the gratitude for escaping the clutches of a potential threat washes over me. Whether his intent was to harm, rob, or seize my car remains a mystery, and I can't help but wonder if he was ever apprehended. Looking back, I am just thankful that I managed to evade him, recognizing that his motives extended beyond a mere desire for a ride. This story takes me back to April 2015, when I was just 16 years old, eagerly preparing to take my driving test. Having acquired my permit a few months earlier, I was engaged in behind-the-wheel classes. A friendly instructor, equipped with a special car featuring a passenger side brake, guided me through three-hour sessions to ensure I was ready for the upcoming test. On the night of this particular tale, it marked my third and final session with the instructor. Commencing around 6 p.m., we embarked on a drive through various roads, practicing and reviewing maneuvers. As the clock ticked towards 8 p.m., the sun began its descent, casting a darkness that set the stage for an unexpected turn of events. Our journey led us to a quiet and deserted park, accompanied by an adjacent, empty parking lot. I had no familiarity with the area, making it all the more intriguing. Directed to park the car, my instructor stepped out, setting up small orange cones as makeshift parking guidelines. With the stage set, we commenced practicing parking maneuvers. Situated at one end of the not-so-spacious parking lot, the area was surrounded by mostly quiet residential streets. Engrossed in my parking exercises, a car appeared down one of the streets and entered the parking lot. While it parked at the far end, I paid minimal attention, assuming it to be an ordinary occurrence. Minutes later, another car entered the parking lot, stopping at a closer distance to us. My instructor casually remarked about the oddity of their presence, given the darkness. Despite the unusualness, I continued focusing on perfecting my parking skills. As time passed, one of the cars abruptly backed out of its parking space. Initially thinking it would exit the lot, it instead drove behind us, stopping only a few feet away. The situation perplexed both me and my instructor. Wondering about their intentions, my instructor decided to investigate, instructing me to wait in the car. As my instructor approached the car behind us, I anxiously waited, looking straight ahead. Suddenly, my instructor returned much quicker than anticipated, displaying a sense of panic. He urgently instructed me to leave the parking lot, disregarding the cones. Though confused, I followed his instructions, and the car behind us trailed along. Only later did my instructor reveal the cause of his alarm. The man in the car behind us had a gun. The revelation heightened my fear, especially since I was the one behind the wheel. Following my instructor's guidance, we made our way to the police station. the two cars tailing us the entire journey. They made no attempt to overtake or harm us. Upon reaching the police station, I parked the car, and the two cars following us continued without stopping. We reported the incident, cutting the driving lesson short. My parents were called, and I was picked up, relieved to be safe. Despite the unsettling experience, I managed to pass my driving test on the first attempt. However, the memory of that encounter remains etched in my mind. Late one night, just 4 months back, I found myself cruising through the city in my trusty sedan. My job involved delivering goods to a handful of family-owned stores scattered around town. It was a typical night, and after wrapping up the last delivery, I headed toward the warehouse, a good 30 minutes away. The clock had just struck 11 p.m. and the city was quiet with only me on the road. Or so I thought. After a few minutes of driving, I noticed a car trailing me at an intersection. It was an odd occurrence, considering I was in a slow-moving car, and most drivers would usually overtake, but not this one. As I continued down the road, the headlights of the mysterious car became increasingly brighter, almost blinding in my rearview mirror. They were tailgating me so closely that their lights were practically blocked by the back of my car. This bizarre behavior started to make me uneasy. Despite an open lane beside us, they stubbornly stuck to tailgating instead of overtaking. Now, nervousness began to creep in. I decided to slow down as I approached a stop sign, intending to turn and put some distance between us. However, just as I came to a stop, the unthinkable happened. A gentle bump from behind. The impact wasn't severe, but it was enough to jolt my entire car forward. Instinctively, I put the vehicle in park and prepared to inspect the damage. Before I could step out, a man wearing a somewhat unsettling smile appeared at my window, motioning for me to join him. I cautiously opened the door only to notice two more guys lingering at the back of my car, eyeing me with an unsettling intensity. The man at the window started offering explanations as we walked toward the rear, but it soon became apparent that he was severely intoxicated. His words were slurred, and he seemed nonchalant about the accident. The other two guys appeared just as inebriated, but it was hard to confirm. Surveying the damage, it was clear both vehicles were worse off than initially thought. I requested the man's insurance information, went to fetch mine, but to my surprise, none of them had budged. A second request for insurance details was met with silent stares. In that eerie moment, I felt their collective gaze piercing through me, and that's when my heart started to race. Without a word, I turned to retreat to my car, but their footsteps echoed ominously behind me. Before I could reach the safety of my vehicle, one of them seized me, slamming me against the side of the car. The assailant began issuing threats, while the others busied themselves, pillaging whatever they could from their car. For what felt like an eternity, I endured the pressure of my head against the cold metal, anticipating the worst. Abruptly, they shoved me away and directed me toward their car. Panic set in, and I knew that if I succumbed to being thrown into that car, my fate might become something out of a nightmare. Summoning every ounce of strength, I resisted their attempts, making it as challenging as possible for them to force me inside. A fierce struggle ensued, lasting about 20 seconds, during which I fought back vehemently. Eventually, they flung me aside, piled into their car, and sped away into the night. I hastily rose to my feet, adrenaline coursing through my veins, and reached for my phone in the center console. With trembling hands, I dialed the police. However, even after the incident, the attackers remained unidentified. It left me grappling with the uncertainty of whether it was a one-off drunk assault or part of a more sinister pattern. The motives behind their attempt to coerce me into their car remain shrouded in mystery. Despite the lack of clarity, the chilling reality of what could have unfolded looms over the incident, etching itself into the darkest corners of my memory. A while back, during my high school days, I found myself chilling with my buddies. Our conversation took a turn towards the mysterious world of the deep web. One of my pals, let's call him Jake, had ventured into it before, and he shared some intriguing tales. We delved into the depths of the deep web during our entire lunch period at school, and I couldn't help but become increasingly curious about it. Later that day, once I was back home from school, my curiosity got the best of me, pushing me to explore the deep web myself. I exchanged texts with Jake, who provided me with the browser to use and step-by-step instructions. Following his guidance, I successfully accessed the deep web. As I ventured further, I decided to check out some deep web websites. The very first one led me to a screen that was completely black, except for a small icon in the upper left corner. Clicking on it transported me to a web page filled with images devoid of any context. There were pictures of animals like fish or a bear, mixed with an assortment of random objects. My curiosity led me to click on the image of a fish, and the page began loading. The loading process took an agonizingly long time, about 30 seconds or so. Once it finally completed, to my surprise and unease, my face appeared on the screen, captured by my own webcam. In a panic, I hastily grabbed a blanket from my bed and covered the webcam, causing the screen to go black. Relief washed over me briefly, but my calm was short-lived. Text started to appear on the screen, slowly getting typed out. The first thing that caught my eye was my name. Not just my first name, but my full name, including my middle and last names. This revelation sent shivers down my spine. To add to my horror, more personal information began to appear on the screen. The school I attended, my phone number, and even the state and city where I lived. Overwhelmed, I decided to close out of the browser, but to my dismay, my mouse was frozen. Panic set in as I repeatedly pressed Ctrl+Delete, desperately trying to regain control. In my frantic state, I began pressing random buttons on the keyboard, hoping for a miracle. Even turning off the monitor proved futile. I pressed the power button on my computer, but nothing happened. Frustrated and scared, I went to the wall and unplugged the power source, an extension cord connected to the wall. Everything shut down at that moment. I sat there in shock for what felt like an eternity, taking in the gravity of the situation. After a few minutes, I mustered the courage to plug my computer back in and swiftly deleted the browser. Fortunately, I had been planning to get a new computer for a while, and shortly after that eerie incident with the deep web, I finally made the upgrade. The memory of that chilling experience will forever be etched in my mind, serving as a stark reminder of the dark corners one can stumble upon in the vast realm of the deep web. A long while back, around the mid-2000s, during my high school days, I found solace in my computer after school. Despite not being one of the popular jocks, I was a shy kid, and gaming became my go-to source of fun. The concept of the deep web intrigued me, so one day, I decided to venture into it for the first time. Being somewhat tech-savvy, I easily figured out how to access it. I started with a few normal websites and gradually stumbled upon the more unusual corners of the internet. Some of the sites I found were downright bizarre, but there was one that stood out. It seemed to be filled with puzzles and codes. Intrigued, I spent about 10 to 15 minutes trying to decipher them. Suddenly, out of nowhere, my fax machine started printing something. The paper it produced was covered in a large series of numbers, leaving me bewildered about how this could happen. As the printer spat out more and more pages, a sense of unease crept over me. To stop the incessant printing, I hastily took all the paper out of the printer. However, my printer seemed intent on its mysterious task. In the midst of this bizarre situation, my phone, an old landline without caller ID, started ringing. Curiosity getting the better of me, I answered, only to be met with a series of beeps and strange noises on the other end. Perturbed, I hung up the phone, realizing it was time to log off the deep web. Closing out of the puzzling website, I powered off my computer, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling that had settled over me. Just when I thought the strange events were over, the phone rang again. This time, I answered, unsure if it might be my parents. Yet the only response I received was the same perplexing series of noises. Growing increasingly disturbed, I decided to unplug the printer from the wall, hoping it would cease its mysterious activity. The phone calls persisted, so I opted to unplug the phone as well. With my parents still at work, I began ignoring the unnerving calls. When my parents returned home later, I cautiously plugged the printer and phone back in, hoping that the strange occurrences had come to an end. Fortunately, the calls, faxes, and eerie letters ceased, and life returned to normal. About 2 weeks later, however, I received an unsettling letter in the mail. It was addressed to me, with no return address. Opening it revealed another sheet filled with numbers and code, sending a chill down my spine. Thankfully, this was the last of it. I never encountered more faxes, phone calls, or mysterious letters. Though I'll never know who or what was behind those unnerving incidents, I can only hope it was just a skilled hacker having some twisted fun. Back in the day, I used to explore the deep web quite frequently. Being a computer enthusiast, my friends and I would occasionally venture into the depths of the web out of sheer curiosity. One day, I found myself alone in a deep web chat room where the conversations always managed to captivate me. On this particular day, I was mostly an observer, watching people interact. Every now and then, I'd join in with a comment or two. That's when one user in the chat singled me out, turning our casual conversation into a heated argument. Things took a dark turn when he threatened to come after me. At first, I thought it was just a joke, so I responded with a sarcastic remark that only fueled his anger. He hurled more menacing words my way, making me increasingly uncomfortable. Feeling uneasy, I decided to exit the chat, closing everything down and logging off. About 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, asking why I had left. It sent shivers down my spine, but given the reputation of skilled hackers on the deep web, I tried to brush it off. Ignoring the text, I hoped the stranger wouldn't reach out again, though I couldn't shake a lingering sense of fear. A couple of hours later, my phone started ringing with an unknown number on the display. I answered, only to be met with eerie silence on the other end, just breathing. I hung up, trying to resume my activities, but a few minutes later, as I glanced out my front window, I noticed a car parked in front of my house. Straining to see who it was in the darkness, I couldn't make out anything from the odd angle. I kept a watchful eye on it for the next few hours, and it didn't budge. As night fell, I decided it was time to get some sleep. Before bed, I covered all the windows, double-checked the locks, and cautiously retired. It took me a while, but eventually, sleep claimed me. The next morning, I cautiously approached the window, relieved to find the car gone. When I powered up my computer, a chilling revelation awaited me. Several files were already open, displaying photos of my house, my car, and the worst of all, a picture of me sleeping, taken from inside my house, seemingly snapped from my bedroom doorway. Disbelief washed over me, and I frantically searched every room in my house, but the intruder had vanished. As I reached the front door, I realized it was unlocked, leaving me baffled about how they managed to gain entry. A deep sleeper, I hadn't been stirred by their presence. For the following days, paranoia consumed me. I constantly glanced over my shoulder and peered out the window, half expecting the return of the ominous car. Things seemed to calm down until about a week later when I awoke in the dead of night, hearing a sound emanating from my room. Initially, I dismissed it as my imagination. But as I sat up, I caught a glimpse of a man walking away. This time I didn't hesitate. I immediately called the police. As I dialed, I heard the intruder leaving my house. Though I regretted not involving the police after the initial incident, feeling foolish, I recounted the entire ordeal to them. They took down the information, assuring me they'd patrol the neighborhood over the next few nights. Thankfully, nothing further occurred, and I made a firm decision to steer clear of the deep web. The unnerving events had left an indelible mark on my sense of security, reminding me of the dangers lurking in the virtual shadows. In my younger days, I moved into my own place for the first time, and around that time, I decided to delve into the mysterious world of the deep web. The idea of it had always intrigued me since my childhood, and eventually, curiosity got the better of me. As a lifelong gamer, I was particularly interested in exploring the types of games available on the deep web. My initial deep web excursions involved exploring various websites, some offering typical games, and others presenting rather unusual ones. Over the next week or so, I continued to navigate the deep web, trying out different games. Then, one day, I stumbled upon an odd-looking game that had been recommended to me in one of the gaming forums I frequented. Upon launching the game, I was immediately struck by the crude graphics reminiscent of early 90s video games. I found myself controlling a character within a house, and to my surprise, the in-game house eerily mirrored my real-life home. Despite the less than impressive graphics, the accuracy of the virtual representation of my house was mind-boggling. Every detail from furniture to the placement of my TV and couch was spot on. The more I explored the in-game house, the more uneasy I became, wondering how anyone could possess such detailed information. Suddenly, another user appeared in the game, a figure clad entirely in black, wearing a ski mask. This mysterious character was now inside the virtual version of my house, and a sense of panic set in. I hurriedly attempted to escape in the game, but things took a bizarre turn as the game started glitching severely. Within a minute, the game froze and eventually crashed. The unsettling experience was enough to make me decide that I was done with the deep web. I promptly deleted the browser I had used to access it, hoping to put the strange encounter behind me. However, a few days later, in the middle of the night, my phone alerted me to activity detected by my doorbell security camera. Anxiously, I checked the footage, hoping for a mundane explanation. To my dismay, the video revealed a man dressed entirely in black, donning a ski mask, approaching my front door. He stood there, gazing into the camera for a while, then slowly waved before turning and walking away. I kept watching, half expecting his return, but he didn't come back. The incident left me on edge for the remainder of the night. Since that unnerving occurrence, my interest in the deep web has vanished entirely. The peculiar connection between the strange game and the real-life visitation was enough to convince me that some mysteries are best left unexplored. A couple of years back, when I was still in high school at the tender age of 15, a peculiar incident unfolded. It was one rainy night, and my older brother, a senior in high school, and I found ourselves at home alone, our parents away. With boredom setting in, we decided to satisfy our curiosity about the deep web, something we had always been intrigued by. After some contemplation, my brother, claiming to know how to access the deep web, led us to an old computer tucked away in the basement. We figured the basement provided a certain level of seclusion, just in case we encountered any hacking risks. Despite our reservations, we couldn't resist the temptation, and once my brother successfully navigated us into the deep web, we started exploring random content before stumbling upon a chat room. Engaging in conversations with some random users, we soon received a link from an anonymous user. The link arrived without any context, and a gut feeling urged me to caution my brother against clicking it. Ignoring my warning, he clicked the link, and in an instant, the computer froze, plunging the room into complete darkness. With all the lights off in the basement, the only sound was the rhythmic patter of rain outside. We assumed the link had crashed the computer, possibly even breaking it. I suspected it might be a prank by the user. My brother attempted to troubleshoot by pressing keys and moving the mouse, but the computer remained unresponsive. We decided to abandon the basement and returned upstairs, contemplating our next move, convinced we had somehow damaged the old computer. After a brief discussion, we mustered the courage to venture back downstairs. Upon entering the room housing the computer, we were met with a chilling sight. The screen displayed an image of a man wearing a truly eerie clown mask against a black background. His gaze was fixed on the screen, a haunting smile stretching across his face. Initially thinking it was a creepy video, our shock escalated when the clown pointed directly at my brother. In a panic, my brother distanced himself, but the clown persistently pointed at him as he moved around the room. My heart raced as the clown then shifted its attention to me, waving a finger as if beckoning me closer to the screen. Reacting swiftly, my brother covered the webcam attached to our computer, shouting at me to shut it down. I rushed to press the power button, but to our horror, the clown image lingered on the screen, unaffected. Desperation set in as I unplugged the entire power strip from the wall, finally shutting down the computer. It took us a few minutes to catch our breath, leaving the old computer in the basement unplugged for the next few days. Surprisingly, when we decided to check on it again, the computer seemed to function perfectly fine. The bizarre encounter left us perplexed, the memory lingering as a strange tale from our teenage years. We decided to steer clear of the deep web after that unnerving incident, a cautionary lesson in the unexpected perils that lurk in the shadows of the internet. Back when I was 16, a friend introduced me to this hidden part of the internet called Dream Market. He used it to buy stuff like weed. He even had what he called a trusted dealer, whose details he shared with me to make a purchase. I don't support such activities. I was just young and naive, thinking that getting weed could help me with my senior projects. After that initial purchase, I couldn't resist the temptation to explore Dream Market further. I discovered a range of items, from counterfeit bills to real guns. It piqued my curiosity about the deep web. On Dream Market, I stumbled upon a link that led to what seemed to be a drug chat room. Many people were advertising the drugs they were selling, complete with their rates. It caught my interest. In the chat, people shared random .onion links. I clicked on one that took me to a black page titled Home Base in large text. Below that were various other links. I clicked on several, but most didn't load. Probably dead links. One, however, led to another chat room without a title. 3 random-looking usernames were signed in. Without any specific purpose, I joined the conversation. The chat history showed previous conversations in various languages. A guy, still in the chat, greeted me with a yo before I said anything. I responded, and he asked what I was looking for. I replied with a casual, "I don't know, LOL." He inquired about how I found the link, and I told him it was from a site called Homebase. Curious about the deep web, I asked if he had any interesting links. His response was a simple LOL, followed by a link. Clicking on the link, the page took a while to load. First, a black background loaded, followed by a text box near the bottom. The last thing to appear was a video. Initially, I thought it was a pausable video, but it turned out to be some kind of live streaming video. The black and white footage showed a dark room with mannequin-like figures seated in wooden chairs. The grainy effect added an eerie touch to the scene, making it feel surreal and unsettling. Unable to discern whether it was live or not, the video took a terrifying turn. One of the seemingly mannequin figures in the chair suddenly jumped up, sprinting towards the camera, accompanied by a loud, staticky screaming sound. The porcelain mask on the person's face filled the screen, leaving only darkness. Confused and disturbed, I returned to the chat, asking the guy what on earth I had just witnessed. His response was a cryptic, "Just keep watching, LOL," after which he left the chat. Going back to the video, the live stream window was gone, replaced by a blank screen with only the text box at the bottom. Strangely, I couldn't type anything, and my Tor browser window suddenly closed without any input from me. Then, a deep, raspy voice emanated from my speakers, attempting to disguise itself. The voice knew my first name and claimed to have all my files. Suddenly, the webcam window popped up, displaying my face on the screen. Panicking, I shut down my laptop and headed to the Geek Squad at Best Buy, where I purchased the computer. The guy at Geek Squad suspected that the intruder obtained basic info from my computer, like my account name. he suggested a factory reset, which we performed together. Fortunately, I didn't have anything crucial to lose, as the computer was relatively new. In the end, I learned a valuable lesson. If you ever venture into the deep web, use a VPN, even for seemingly safe websites. In the past, I used to navigate the dark web quite frequently. One evening, while aimlessly exploring various sites out of sheer boredom, I stumbled upon a chat room where I encountered an individual named Michael. We struck up a conversation that eventually blossomed into an unexpected friendship. For months, we chatted daily about mundane topics, sharing funny videos and memes like any regular friends would. Michael became my internet buddy, and we got along remarkably well. One typical night, engrossed in computer shenanigans, I found myself chatting with Michael and some other friends I had made on the dark web. Then came the moment when Michael sent me a link, a seemingly harmless gesture that would lead to an indelible mark on my memory. With a casual click and an anticipatory smile, I expected to be greeted by a humorous meme video. However, my expectations were shattered when the link directed me to a live video that defied all decency. In the unsettling footage, a woman, completely naked and bound, appeared alongside a masked man, presumably her kidnapper. What unfolded was beyond sinister, and the gravity of the situation is still haunting as I recount it now. The masked man, addressing over 200 viewers on the live stream, asked them to vote on how he should execute the helpless woman. The gruesome options included burning her alive, submerging her in scalding water, dismemberment until bleeding out, or a gunshot. Shockingly, the majority opted for boiling her to death. Overwhelmed with panic, I couldn't tear my eyes away, recording the horrifying scene on my phone, a desperate attempt to document evidence for the police. And the experience left an indelible mark on my psyche. I wrestled with the conflicting instincts to look away and the morbid curiosity that kept drawing my gaze back to the screen. Unable to endure the brutality any longer, I swiftly exited the dark web, shutting down my computer and even unplugging it from the wall. In a state of distress, I reached out to my best friend in real life, eager to share the nightmarish encounter. However, to my surprise, he advised against involving the police, cautioning me that I might face repercussions just for witnessing the horrific event. Haunted by doubts, I hesitated to contact law enforcement, eventually deciding against it. Looking back, I question whether they could have taken any meaningful action. The uncertainty surrounding Michael's involvement in the disturbing incident further complicated matters, and I chose to distance myself from the dark web entirely. Whether Michael intentionally sent me that link or fell victim to hacking remains unclear. Regardless, the ordeal served as a stark reminder of the dangers lurking online. Living a rather ordinary yet somewhat boring life, my routine involved returning home from work around 10:30 p.m. each night. More often than not, my wife would already be peacefully asleep by the time I arrived. Our moments together were mostly confined to Saturdays, given that it was my only day off during the week. Upon returning from work, my typical ritual involved grabbing a late-night snack, watching TV, or engaging in computer games and web browsing. On a particular night, I found myself engrossed in a game with my buddy, now known as Eric. I can't recall the catalyst, but our conversation veered into the mysterious realms of the dark web. Although I had heard about the deep web before, my knowledge was limited. The sinister reputation of the dark web intrigued me, and Eric's tales only fueled my curiosity. He guided me on how to access this clandestine domain, emphasizing the need to download a tool called the Tor browser. After our gaming session, I delved into online research, even resorting to YouTube tutorials on navigating the dark web. While engrossed in my exploration, my wife, stirred from sleep, inquired if I was joining her in bed. Taking it as a subtle cue, I abandoned the computer, promising to delve further into my research the next day. True to my word, the subsequent evening, with my wife in a peaceful slumber, I seized the opportunity to explore the mysterious dark web. Fueled by curiosity, I cautiously maneuvered my way into this unknown territory. Remembering Eric's advice to tread carefully and avoid suspicious links, I began my exploration, uncovering an array of bizarre sites. Without delving into exhaustive details, I found myself on a website offering illegal weapons. Clicking what I presumed to be the next page of weapon listings, I was transported to an entirely different website, opening a new tab on my computer. Out of the blue, hostile messages flooded my screen. Threats of finding and harming me, coupled with demands for money, emanated from an anonymous aggressor. Irritated, I engaged in a war of words, dismissing the threats as juvenile attempts at intimidation. The tone escalated, with the tormentor disclosing my address and real name, sending shivers down my spine. Fearing the worst, I was warned against logging off. The assailant vowed repercussions for my family unless I complied. The ominous promise of hacking my computer to plant disturbing images intensified my panic. Demanding $2,000 in Bitcoin, the choice between compliance and resistance became increasingly dire. While reluctant to capitulate, I found myself cornered, unable to exit the dark web or the Tor browser. Somehow, the assailant had hacked my computer. In a desperate move, I unplugged the computer from the wall, halting the intrusion temporarily. Upon restarting, a barrage of graphic and disturbing images plagued my screen, inducing nausea and a severe panic attack. Subsequently, a chat request from the tormentor surfaced, escalating the threats. Debating whether to comply, I grappled with the potential consequences. Despite a strong desire to end the ordeal, an innate distrust prevailed. Unplugging my computer once more, I resolved never to log back in. This traumatic episode unfolded nearly a decade ago, marking the most unsettling experience of my life. Reporting the incident to the authorities yielded no resolution. My computer was seized, never to be returned. Having moved away from that ominous house after almost 2 years, my family and I, fortunately, encountered no physical harm. However, unexplainable occurrences persisted, such as mysterious knocks on doors and bedroom windows during late-night hours. While no intruders were sighted, the lingering uncertainty prevailed. Whether linked to the dark web tormentor or random pranks by mischievous kids, the truth remains elusive to this day. I used to be an ordinary guy, navigating through life without much excitement. My days were routine: work, home, dinner, and a bit of TV before bed. That was until I discovered the dark web, a place I never thought I'd tread. Little did I know, the decision to explore this sinister realm would plunge me into a harrowing nightmare. It all began on a quiet evening when boredom nudged me towards the mysterious corners of the internet. Intrigued by the whispers of the dark web's secrets, I decided to venture into the unknown. Armed with a virtual cloak of anonymity, I downloaded the infamous Tor browser, the gateway to the hidden recesses of the web. As I delved into the murky depths, the initial shock of encountering illegal activities and shady dealings began to fade. It became a twisted fascination, a digital realm where one could stumble upon the unimaginable. Late one night, curiosity led me to a chat room, a gathering place for those who lurked in the shadows. In this dimly lit virtual space, I connected with a user who went by the enigmatic moniker Silent Watcher. The conversations began innocently enough, discussions about obscure topics, sharing bizarre memes, and the occasional dark humor. Silent Watcher seemed like just another online acquaintance, a cipher hiding behind a screen. However, the seemingly harmless exchanges took a chilling turn when Silent Watcher initiated a private chat. A link appeared on my screen, and a sinister invitation lingered in the virtual air. I hesitated, but ultimately succumbed to the intrigue, clicking the link with a sense of foreboding. To my horror, the webpage that unfolded revealed a live stream. A woman bound and helpless, her eyes reflecting sheer terror. A masked figure, clad in darkness, stood ominously beside her. The chat section buzzed with disturbing suggestions, as viewers proposed unspeakable fates for the captive woman. Fear gripped me, and a moral dilemma paralyzed my actions. Should I alert the authorities and risk exposing my clandestine online activities? Or should I bear witness to this digital atrocity, fearing the potential consequences of intervention? As the majority voted for the most gruesome demise, the masked figure, devoid of any humanity, carried out the heinous act. The woman's agonizing screams echoed through my headphones, leaving an indelible mark on my soul. The screen displayed an unspeakable horror, forcing me to confront the malevolent underbelly of the digital world. Overwhelmed by guilt and helplessness, I made a hasty retreat from the dark web. I shut down my computer, severed the connection, and tried to erase the haunting images etched into my mind. Sleep became elusive as the echoes of that fateful live stream reverberated in my nightmares. Days turned into nights, and the weight of the dark secret burdened my conscience. The lines between reality and the virtual realm blurred, leaving me in a perpetual state of anxiety. I grappled with the decision to share my chilling experience with someone, anyone who might understand. Eventually, unable to contain the torment within, I confided in my closest friend, Jake. As I recounted the events, a mixture of disbelief and horror clouded Jake's face. His advice, however, sent shivers down my spine. "Stay silent," he urged, cautioning against involving the authorities. The digital world, he warned, held its own set of perils, and intervention might bring unforeseen consequences. Haunted by the specter of that night, I withdrew from the dark web, vowing never to return. The virtual landscape, once a source of fascination, transformed into a realm of unspeakable horrors. My ordinary life had become intertwined with an extraordinary darkness that refused to release its grip. In the ensuing weeks, a sinister undercurrent permeated my reality. Strange occurrences unfolded. Unexplained knocks on my door late at night. Glimpses of shadowy figures lurking in the periphery. Paranoia crept into my daily existence, and the line between the tangible and the imagined blurred. The torment escalated as the unseen forces intensified their presence. Sleepless nights turned into days marked by perpetual dread. The walls of my sanity crumbled, and the once ordinary life I had known slipped away. In my quest for the unknown, I had unwittingly opened a Pandora's box of horrors. The dark web, with its promises of anonymity, had ensnared me in a web of malevolence that transcended the digital realm. The shadows cast by that night continued to darken my days, and the whispers of the virtual abyss lingered in the recesses of my consciousness. As I grappled with the aftermath, I questioned the very fabric of reality. Was the darkness that now surrounded me a manifestation of my own guilt? Or had I unknowingly invited something far more sinister into my life? The answers eluded me, leaving me trapped in a nightmarish limbo, forever haunted by the echoes of the dark web.